All right, guys. Our next guest is kind enough to join us in between his trip on the way home to New Zealand. I'm, of course, talking about the man behind City Kickboxing, Eugene Bareman, joining us from LAX Airport after already flying for a couple of hours from Las Vegas. We feel very honored right now. What's the situation down there with LAX? Are you there with the team and the boys right now?
Yeah, the boys are just getting their tickets, and yeah, we're here. We're ready to we're ready to get home. We got a voucher home straight away, which is one of the rare privileges that we've had recently. So we get to come home almost immediately after the fight, which is a good feeling. But we've still got that 2-week quarantine, but it's better than 7 or 8 weeks overseas and then the 2-week quarantine, isn't it?
Yeah, and by the way, when me and Casper fly back and forth to do some of the media events, it's definitely the biggest low light for us is getting on that plane knowing you've got to sit there and be on that plane for your 9, 12, 14, sometimes more hours. And the layovers at LAX for 9 hours, which is what you're going through right now, is definitely some of the worst stuff as well. I'm wondering, though, you've got some team members fighting at UFC 260. Does that mean you won't be able to make it back, obviously, because you've got to do the 2-week quarantine? Was a part of you at all tempted to stick around?
Yeah, look, Israel obviously got a lot of notice before his fight, so we were able to get the vouchers really early, whereas Volko, Shane and Brad didn't really get enough notice for me to get vouchers that come back soon enough to make it viable to be overseas. To be at their fight, it would have meant I would have had to be overseas for like 3 months or something. And I just, I just can't do that. So it's again, just like with Dan in Abu Dhabi, like we just got to make it work and do our best.
I take it there'll be some kind of like Zoom trainings or something like that with Volko, Brad, and Shane just prior to the event, or maybe during the week.
Yeah, look, I was there for most of the training camp. Obviously, I've been away for a week and a bit now, but I was there for most of the training camp, and I'm pretty happy with where I left off before we came here to UFC 259. They've finished up the camp with Mike Angove and the boys. And they're going to be cornered by, Brad's going to be cornered by Joe Lopez and Frank Hickman and Mike Angove. And Shane is going to be cornered by Brad. So after Brad finishes his fight,
wow,
Brad's going to turn around and coach Shane and Volker. So
that's crazy.
It works out.
Dude, last time we were talking to you, I was mentioning how crazy of a period it has been for City Kickboxing. Obviously, junior fight in one of the biggest boxing matches in New Zealand history. Then you guys jump on the plane on Sunday. Then you have this history-making card that just went down this past weekend. And I know you told me and Casper that you were already kind of exhausted sort of halfway through last week. How are you feeling right now? What are the energy levels like right now after this crazy few weeks?
Nah, I'm pretty knackered. I'm pretty exhausted. But I always knew I had this 2-week quarantine coming up, which is basically stuck in a hotel room for 2 weeks. So I always knew I was going to get plenty of rest and recovery. So I'm kind of, as much as it's annoying to be stuck in a hotel room for 2 weeks, I will get some really good quality rest.
Of course, yeah, after the crazy roller coaster that you guys have had. So looking back at the fight, Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya, what were your sort of biggest takeaways from that fight now that it's sort of all in the books? And by the way, have you had a chance to re-watch the fight since it happened?
Nah, actually, I haven't re-watched the fight. We kind of, the boys brought we I refused to watch the fight like on anything other than high quality, high definition. So we kind of share a password here, and every time I've been on, one of them's been watching the fight. So I had a chance. They're all on my password, so I haven't had a chance because they've hogged my password. But
just ask you got the Submission Radio password anytime you want it.
Yeah, look, if I change my password, that'd all be buggered.
You mentioned to Brett Okamoto after the fight that you'll be looking at some of those takedowns that Jan was able to get towards the end of the fight. I'm wondering, was there anything else that Jan was able to do in that fight that kind of surprised you, or was something that you guys weren't expecting?
Look, Jan did really well. Jan did. What we didn't expect was Jan to be so standoffish. We thought he'd be a lot more aggressive, and we really put a lot of emphasis into our training for him to come forward and rush us a lot. And when he stood there and postured with Israel a lot, we didn't really expect that, but we were prepared for it. But I believe that made the fight a little closer than we expected it to be.
What did you think as far as Israel's performance relative to sort of what you guys trained for? I guess it takes two, right? Jan surprised you a little bit by being defensive. What about as far as how Israel was able to handle everything and sort of what he did in the fight?
Yeah, I think Israel performed well, but did he perform his best? No. But did he perform terribly? No. He just had a really good opponent in front of him, and a really good team who had a good strategy and who had the right answers. Israel didn't perform terribly. A lot of that was due to his opponent, really. So I'm not going to try and take any credit away from Jan. He did really well there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very competitive fight. I saw that Israel was holding his right hand in certain bits of the fight. I'm just wondering, was there an injury there or anything that you can sort of share with us in regards to what was happening there?
Nah, he likes to adjust his glove. He likes his glove to sit on his hand a certain way, so he's just moving his glove around.
I was going to say, I think one of the things that was surprising, not only as far as what Israel alluded to with Jan being so defensively sound, but also the way Jan was able to sort of, hit back and land a lot of jabs, a lot of straights, even some good hooks on Israel. Did it surprise you that he was able to land on a guy who obviously doesn't get touched a whole lot in Israel?
Yes, it did surprise me a little bit, but again, we kind of we made some adjustments. We were a little slow to adjust in this fight. We expected to have a little bit more of a lead coming into 4 and 5, but we thought that we would take over. The more that fight progressed, we were under the thinking that the better it would be for us. Given that obviously a part of our game plan wasn't to be taken down in those later rounds.
There it is. Someone's stealing something from the news agency at LAX. Let me ask you this: when the scorecard was read at the end, a lot of people, obviously, the judges, didn't do the best job, but a lot of people sort of surprised with some of the scoring. How did you actually have the fight scored as you were watching it? Did you have Israel up when they were reading out those scorecards? In your mind, do you believe he had sort of done enough to get his hand raised?
No, I wasn't. I'm going to be honest. I wasn't confident. I thought the first 3 rounds, I basically had 2 of those to Israel. I thought Israel definitely had 2. And then there was 1 swing round in there, which can go both ways. And then obviously the last 2, based on the takedown and Israel's inability to defend and not get up, the last 2 are going to go to Jan. But 10-8's, 10-8's ridiculous. Like, you just look at, you can have a look during that night of fights, and there were people that spent a lot longer duration of time on top of their opponent and did a lot more damage and still couldn't manage a 10-8. There's definitely, sometimes I don't know. I can't get out the mind of those judges, but those 10-8 rounds are ridiculous. Like, Jan did no damage.
Yeah, some of the judging in MMA has gone pretty crazy over the last few events. I know that Israel mentioned it kind of felt like a bad day at the gym, and you guys just had so much stuff on. You flew out on the Sunday after the Junior fight. I know you were hoping to sort of schedule this fight a little bit earlier as well, so there was a little bit more, I suppose, timing in between each fight. Looking back on it, do you think it was a little bit too much stuff happening at once? Do you wish you had a little bit more time to get to Vegas a little earlier to focus on the fight a little bit more without all the chaos and everything that was happening and all the huge fights that you guys were up in at the same time?
Nope, no excuses. I think the training camp went well, and the lead up to the fight and fight week was brilliant. No, I don't. There's no excuses there. Like, this is the thing, man. Like, when you lose, you sometimes, it doesn't happen in the sport nowadays, but sometimes you just lose and you just have to take it. And we're, as a team, we're internalizing it and we're being humble about it and taking it like a loss, like you should do. You can't, it doesn't happen enough in this sport. Like, people kind of refuse to accept the loss, but we're accepting it, and we're going to take what we can out of it.
What did you think of the way Israel handled the loss as well? It was pretty uplifting to see him afterwards, not beaten down at all. It kind of reminded me of like Dominic Cruz after the Cody Garbrandt loss, where he just kind of owned it and didn't make any excuses and talked about how you lose sometimes in life, and almost kind of made you feel like there are bigger things in life than sometimes fighting. What did you think about the way he handled it? I know that you and him aren't always on the same page as far as him and his bravado and stuff. You're more quiet and reserved, but I imagine for you that would have stood out post fight.
Israel handled it like I expected him to handle it, and like he's handled every other loss. And some of those losses that he's taken have been terrible losses, terrible decisions. He's quite frankly been ripped off, and he's still taken it the same way he took this fight. This fight, he's got no reason to, be outraged or, like it was a fight and Jan won. So if you look at his record of losses, he's only had a few, but he's taken those losses as I expected a person in my team to take them. He's being very humble and gracious about it, and that's part of the reason that makes him so good, is because those losses, like all the top athletes in the world, those losses, they flick a switch and they take you to a different place.
I think you guys are very much a good example of sort of taking a loss and using it to move forward and improve things. I know it's kind of early and you haven't watched the fight, obviously, because of the whole password thing, but is there anything that you learned sort of from that night watching it? Israel spoke about how he wants to go back to the drawing board. Anything that stand out to you?
We've learned We've learned a shit ton, to be honest. We've learned a shit ton. There's not too much that I want to talk about what we've learned, because, I always want to keep whatever edge that we have over everybody else. I don't want to talk about too much what we've learned. But let me just say to you guys that as much as when you're winning, you try to learn just as much as, like, if you're in a situation where you lost, it's never the case. And only a loss can bring out a certain amounts of attention to detail, certain amounts of enthusiasm, certain amounts of excitement to get back in and fix up some of the errors and kind of rejig a few things and rethink a few things. And we're excited about this loss, because we know the power of it. We know that if we can capture the power of the loss, we can really take things to another level, because we've done it many times before.
So you know basically what you would have to adjust in that fight to change the outcome somewhere down the future. I'm not expecting you to give me the game plan or anything, but you already kind of know what went wrong and what worked and what didn't work.
100%. Like, I don't know exactly how many hours have been between when that fight ended and now, but I guarantee you, if you look through my message group, about every half hour to hour on the spot, one of my coaches is putting a clip of a video or a comment, or it's been a constant chatter since that fight finished about where we need to go, what we did wrong, what adjustments we need to make, to all different facets of what we did, from even the time we went to bed. Some of the boys there were some concerns that perhaps we weren't sleeping as well as we should. We break everything into some pretty finite detail, and the other coaches and the people that I trust have already attacked this fight with massive enthusiasm, and it's quite amazing, to be honest. The fight's barely finished, and we haven't really stopped talking about it.
Yeah, so with the sleeping thing, what happened there? Because I know Israel was joking around a little bit how he couldn't sleep, so he drank some wine as a little sort of nudge to Paulo Costa. But was there actual sleeping problems? Were there any issues with sleep? And I'm wondering as well, because this is something a lot of fans are asking about. Is size and putting on mass before he returns to Turf 5, is that a factor at all in some of the stuff that you guys reviewed?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. No, look, sleeping wasn't an issue, but it's all about improvement. So if it wasn't perfect, then there's something we can improve. So we had great sleep. Well, one of the coaches mentioned that early on in the week, a lot of us were having quite a disturbed sleep. So they perhaps suggested that we maybe come a little bit earlier. But by the end of the week, we had fully adjusted and we were well rested. So no major concerns there. With the putting on weight, look, our intention was always to go back to 185. If you know about the sport, if you know about the science of putting on weight, when you stack on a significant amount of muscle, then you try and take that muscle off and move back down to a weight. And 95% of cases throughout history, it ends up very bad. And so we knew that we were always coming down to 185. And so we knew we had to compete at our walk-around weight, basically our 185 weight, for this to be successful. And another time in the future, when we're willing to say goodbye to 185, then we'll stack the science behind it and we'll build up properly to, a proper light heavyweight kind of frame. But it just wasn't possible. We were always going down to 185, so we had to fight at that weight.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of making weight, don't be forced to shave off all your pubes just to make the weight limit. In the future, get Manscaped's Lawnmower 3.0 so you don't have to deal with those problems. Keep your balls nice and silky smooth, especially ahead of St. Patrick's Day. Remember, St. Patrick's Day is for pubs, not pubes. And you can do it with the Lawnmower 3.0, the best grooming tool on the market for any region, especially your downstairs region. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, Cass. So when you're moving up weight class, size does matter. So why not get a couple extra inches with the Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0? Also, what about this guy, the crop preserver right here? It is the ball deodorant that also is anti-chafing. This is a must-have for anybody who's out there trying to do their MMA training, jiu-jitsu training, and in the gym. And with the code word submission, you guys can get 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. Submission Ready is brought to you by Manscaped. If you're a fan of our show, help out the program and also help out the Testicular Cancer Society, because Manscaped puts in money from every purchase to the Testicular Cancer Society to bring awareness to testicular cancer, men's health, and early cancer detection. Get onto Manscaped with code word submission today. But Huge, do you feel like this is just the beginning of this feud with Jan? Obviously, super competitive fight. You guys, a lot of people believe, Israel did a very good job in the fight. It was quite close. Do you believe that this isn't the last time we see these guys fight each other? Do you believe Jan perhaps stays the champion and we see this again down the line, the rematch?
we're competitive. Israel's ultra competitive. Israel will go down and clean up and dominate 185 for a while, and then and I do see Jan as being quite a long reigning champion, and I think we will definitely chase Jan again. He's a worthy opponent, and he's beaten us, and he's a worthy opponent. So I can't exactly predict the future, but we will definitely come hunting for the Polish power again.
I know DC mentioned that even though Jan was able to get this win, that for him, Jon Jones is still the greatest 205er. Do you think people are sort of underestimating what Jan was able to achieve here on the weekend at UFC 259?
You know, you guys can't talk to me about Jon Jones.
What do you mean? You said after the fight. You said after the fight.
You did say after the fight. This is a good point. Listen, you're at LAX, huge. You're still waiting there for another 5-6 hours. What do you have to lose?
Once you cheat, Jon Jones is about as irrelevant as TJ Dillashaw. To me, they don't exist. Is anything TJ Dillashaw did in the past relevant anymore now that he's cheated? No, it's not any different for Jon Jones. So you can't talk to me about Jon Jones. I have a particular opinion, and that isn't shared by the rest of the world. So at the moment, the greatest 205er is Jan Blachowicz. There's no one else. There's no one else as great as him.
I think the only reason why Dennis brought it up is because people saw this fight as a bridge to Jon Jones. And Israel told us that himself. I think a lot of people felt like with this fight and the outcome that Jon Jones fight has fizzled away. And I know that fight had to get past yourself and the rest of the team to even become a real thing. But I feel like this is kind of just very much on the back burner now.
Yeah, this fight had nothing to do with Jon Jones. The choice to take it had zero to do with Jon Jones. The Jon Jones fight hasn't fizzled away. Jon Jones is a businessman. Jon Jones understands how the pay-per-view market works, and he understands where the money is, and that's why this fight doesn't fizzle away. Because at the end of the day, if it makes money, it makes sense, and Jon knows who the biggest star in the sport is at the moment, and who can get him paid the most. That is why the fight won't fizzle out. So, Jon's gonna, if he hasn't already, I'm sure he's probably been on social media and gone through all the antics that he usually does. But at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. The fight doesn't fizzle out because they're the biggest stars in the sport and they bring in the most money, and that's why the fight still exists.
Let me ask you this though. You mentioned before about how Israel's going back down to middleweight and he'll be there for a while, and then you guys will sort of reassess the approach to 205 later down the track. How much longer realistically do you think Israel would have at middleweight? And obviously it's a big assumption, assuming he keeps winning and he holds that belt. But you look at a lot of the top guys and he's already beaten them. A lot of the new challengers might be guys like Darren Till, Marvin Vettori, maybe Kevin Holland, but there's not too many. Do you think his middleweight days are sort of, maybe there's not that many ahead in the future?
There's no Marvin Vettori, there's no Paulo Costa, there's Darren Till, so Darren Till needs to win, and Robert Whittaker, because he's one of our brethren, so he's one of our brothers, he's a Kiwi, so there's 2 fights, and then what do? Jan wins a couple, we win a couple. I don't know. That's just me throwing stuff out there. But you're on the right path. Middleweight. The problem with middleweight at the moment is Israel has got himself into a position where he's cleaned it out a little bit. So, there's Robert, who's right there and who's trudging his way back, who's grinding his way back, and but there's Darren Till is the front runner there. Darren Till, and then hopefully Robert. Hopefully the world's back to normal and Robert can be a massive fight in Melbourne again or Auckland. Probably Auckland. How about that?
Wow.
Let's do that, Robert.
That would be a huge fight. But I'm curious, Huge, because I know last time you spoke to us, you mentioned how Rob would sort of be at the top of that list. So that's switched now. You would say that if Rob wins and Darren Till wins, Darren Till's the front runner now, even if Rob beats Paulo Costa?
But Darren Till's, well, how's Robert the front runner when like, I don't want to say bad things about Robert, but it wasn't a competitive fight. Like, he didn't touch us. So who want how's that the front runner for the next fight? The fight wasn't competitive. The front runner for us is the biggest challenge, and at the moment, it seems to be that Darren Till could have a style that possibly gives Israel a few problems.
So I guess, and then after those two, it would be theoretically back to light heavyweight, right? I guess that light heavyweight, run or title shot could be around the corner.
Theoretically, but you just don't know what the environment is going to look like by the time those two fights get underway. You just don't know what it. No one expected this. You just don't know what's going to happen. But theoretically, for as good as that's worth, maybe.
I've just got
trying to be ambiguous.
What was that you cut out there, Huge?
Trying to be as ambiguous as I can.
We're used to it at this point, Huge. It's part of your charm. It's the song and dance. I love it.
It's like Criminal Intent. We just pick up little clues, and then by the end of the interview, we try to get to an answer. We love it. Keeps us sharp.
Now, I was going to ask you though. But when it comes to light heavyweight, you said you'll sort of reassess things. It's exciting, the idea of Israel leaving middleweight behind one day, hypothetically, and then going to light heavyweight. So if he does that, is it safe to say that then you will put on size, or Israel will put on size in an effort to sort of become a more definitive light heavyweight? And also, how much of a factor do you think size was in this Jan fight?
I think the next time we go to light heavyweight, we use a little bit more. We definitely stack on some weight and try to get our walk around weight and our fight weight a little higher for sure to a proper light heavyweight limit. It wasn't too much of a factor. If you look at Jan's fights, once you let Jan take you down and you give him that crossface and that underhook, and you let him, he knows how to stall out that position. He knows how to win a round from that position. And it don't matter who there's light heavyweights that struggled in that position, who are a lot bigger and stronger than Israel, who haven't been able to have any more success than Israel have. That's just Jan's position. That's how he finishes rounds. He gets into a deep half guard position or a strike control, and he just knows how to work.
Well,
you can't use size as an excuse.
Just quickly before you wrap, Dennis, I was going to say one of the bigger highlights though on the night was obviously Kai Kara-France and his spectacular knockout. He's been chasing that one for a while. To sort of end this on a bit of a good note, how elated were you for Kai being a new father and then getting such a spectacular win, representing the CK boys?
And also coming back a little bit to get that win as well.
Yeah, you have no idea. A lot riding on the line for Kai. It's the first fight of his new contract, coming off a loss. In the flyweight division, you're so close. You're always 1 or 2 fights away from the title. It's ridiculous. They're so competitive up there. New kid, just bought a house. He needs the show and the win. So to get the bonus on top of that, just an amazing feeling. And his win goes a little bit of the way to kind of making this trip a little better, because Israel and Carlos got a lot of joy out of seeing Kai do that. So I was over the moon.
And of course, Carlos, even though it didn't go the way sort of people had hoped, still a very entertaining fight. And I'm supposing that's also a fight where you guys walk away picking up a whole bunch of stuff, where next time when we see him, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff you'll be working on just from that experience in the fight alone.
A great learning fight for Carlos. A great learning fight to get in a guy who's that durable, who Carlos kind of understands the level he's at a little better now, right? Because, sometimes at this level, guys that you've taken out in the same weight division previously, guys the same weight, sometimes they fall, but at the higher levels, they don't. You have to accumulate damage and you have to work them properly. And you have to work to a strategy and a game plan. So Carlos, I think, out of all the athletes this weekend, I think Carlos walks away with probably the most to learn, and he will learn the most, but he's also the guy that will probably come back looking like he's had the most improvements out of all these guys.
Mm. Well, I'll tell you, the takeover continues because obviously we've still got Brad Riddell, Shane Young, Alex Volkanovski, all fighting UFC 260. And for now, we appreciate you joining us. Of course, follow City Kickboxing at City Kickboxing on Instagram and Facebook. Watch out for the fake Facebook page. And we really appreciate you joining us from LAX, man. Hopefully you guys can get some rest and get home in one piece. And the forced rest, I feel like the forced rest is much needed right now, so we hope you enjoy the couple of weeks in the hotel and are actually able to get some rest, because we know you're going to be on that Zoom training everybody from the hotel anyway, but hopefully you can get a couple of hours to yourself.
Thank you, boys. It was a pleasure. Thanks for following us.